G'day guys, Shannon from Auburn Aquariums here. So in this video, I'm just going to be talking about planted aquariums, specifically how to set one up. A lot of customers will ask me, where do I start? How do I keep this type of plant? How do I keep that type of plant? What fish go with plants? What sort of lighting do I need? Stuff like that. So I'm just going to be going through that really quickly in this video for you guys today. So this little planted tank behind me is one of mine. It's a 45 litre aquarium. As you can see, the growth in it is quite good. It's been running quite stable for some years now. It's probably one of my most stable aquariums actually. So we'll just go through that real quick and I will discuss all the various components you're going to need and how they all work with each other. You'll find in a planted aquarium everything's connected. So for example, your lighting affects this, and that then allows something else to be affected. It's all connected, so everything has to work together to grow plants properly. So we're going to jump into that now, guys. Okay, so first thing you'll notice is the light. Now this light is a AI Prime. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll probably have seen my review on this light. So you can go to watch that video if you want to know more specific details about this light. But yes, it is a very good high-end light. It will grow virtually anything you put under it. So yeah, I recommend this for a small planted aquarium. Like the AI Prime can handle an aquarium about 1.5 foot square sort of size, maybe a little bigger. Depending on, of course, what you want to keep under it. This plant can do corals as well as plants, so you can use it for both. So yes, with planted aquariums. First thing you want to look at is your lighting, and that's the one thing you want to invest in first. Lighting is probably the most important thing in a planted tank, so you want to invest as much as you can in that before you even consider CO2 or substrate or any of that other stuff. The reason you want to maximize your lighting over everything else is because the light makes the plants photosynthesize, and if the lighting, for example, isn't good enough, they're not going to photosynthesize properly, so they're not going to absorb your CO2 or your supplements you're putting in or any of that stuff. Plants need a spectrum of about 75K. Between 65 and 75K actually. So you want to try and achieve that with your light. So always bear in mind when buying a light, check the spectrum first. So yeah, once you've got a light with the correct spectrum for plants, next thing you can look at is your substrate. Now substrate, you can go with many different options. You can go with just normal gravel. Plants will grow quite fine in that. You can go with soil. Aquasoil. Aquasoil's more for advanced aquarium keepers, I guess you'd say. Only because aquasoil does come with some problems sometimes. When you first put aquasoil in a tank, it does break down a little bit and cause ammonia. So you got to let your tank cycle. You can't just put plants in straight away like you can with other substrates. And it's very light. So actually planting plants in it can be difficult sometimes because the actual soil is so light. You stick plants down in the soil and they just float back up sometimes. So planting can be difficult. Also, moving plants is hard to do because if you want to pull a plant up and move it or trim it, pulling it up in soil, because soil does eventually break down. As you pull up a plant, a lot of mud comes up with the plant, you end up with a cloudy tank. So I personally don't like soil. Some people like it. It just depends on what you want to achieve with your tank, I suppose. A good substrate I've found is Eco-Complete. So that's what I'm running in this aquarium here, is just a thick layer of Eco-Complete. Eco-Complete is a volcanic rock. I find it very good because it's absorbent. And what I mean by that being a benefit is, say for example, if you dose your supplements like your plant food, your iron, your potassium, your XL, which is your liquid CO2 basically, And if you overdose that, for example, or the plants just aren't absorbing it for some reason, the Eco Complete will absorb it. Your plants can draw it back out later on when they do need it, rather than those supplements, just building up in the tank and feeding your algae. So yes, I highly recommend Eco Complete. But yes, if you don't want to go too extreme, normal gravel will do just fine. So next we're going to talk about your supplements. We'll get onto that one right now. Okay, so supplements. They're another important factor for plants. Again, you need the good lighting first. If your lighting isn't efficient, they're not going to absorb supplements as well as any nutrients out of any substrate you choose. Same as CO2, which I'll get into that one in a second. But for the supplements, Seachem do a very good range of supplements for your plants. There's 4 in total that I would recommend using. Okay, so the first one is XL, or Flourish XL. Flourish XL is basically liquid CO2. Now what this does, it basically just, gives your plants a bit of a boost. It also helps to starve algae, I've found. So if you're it's not made directly it's not really made for this particular purpose, but as an added bonus, it does that anyway. You're having an algae problem, doing like a double dose of XL can help starve the algae. So XL's great. Next one. Potassium. Potassium is basically for your green color in your plants. Plants with a potassium deficiency, they're usually yellow. So if you have plants that are turning yellow, even though you've got good lights, you're doing everything right, plants are still looking a bit yellow, not overly lush and green, it's usually a potassium deficiency. So that helps keep that nice lush green color like I've got behind me here. And the next supplement is iron. Now iron is what we use for red. Any red plants you have, red are always the hardest ones to keep, I've found. And there's a few species of red plants that are pretty easy and don't have any special needs, but yeah, most red plants are quite difficult, even with good lights. Even under good lights, they'll still grow under good lights, no problem. But they'll turn green, or they might only the very top of the plant will be red, and the rest of it will be green. If you want to keep that nice red color along with good lights, that's what iron's for. Iron keeps that red color in plants. Red lotuses. Pretty sure red lotuses are the only easy to keep red plant that keeps the red color without you having to dose iron. You don't need to dose iron for red lotus. They just seem to naturally be that red color all the time. Most other red plants are quite difficult. Like for example, red Ludwigia, it does go green. Pink Rotala, another one that goes green. Might stay a little bit pink on the tips of the leaves, but that's about it. Unless you have a really high iron content, it's going to stay green. Altananthera, I've seen that go green as well. Altananthera is one that the very top of the plant that's mostly exposed to the light, it'll stay nice and red, and the rest of it goes green. A really easy red plant is Armania. I've actually got some in that back corner there. You can just barely see some of it sticking out of the top. That kind of red. It's not overly red, it's more pink, but that's how it looks. But I found it doesn't have any special needs. So Armania is a good red coloured plant to start with. So the last supplement is Flourish. Flourish is an actual plant food. Be careful when dosing this. The other 3, iron, potassium, and XL, if you accidentally overdose a little bit, it's no big deal. It's not really going to cause you many problems. XL especially. XL actually helps to starve algae, so if you overdose XL, you aren't going to have any problems. And iron and potassium, I've never really seen or heard of any major problems with that if it's overdosed a little bit. But Flourish, will give you problems if you overdose. So be very careful dosing this. Because it's a general plant food, that goes for algae as well. If you overdose this, you're basically feeding the algae in your tank. So you don't want that to grow faster. You want it to grow slower, so you don't overdose this. Only dose this set amount for your volume of water. And again, as I was saying, if your light's spectrum is not 75K or 65 to 75K, your plants aren't going to photosynthesize to their full potential. So they're not going to absorb any of those supplements to their full potential. So every time you dose, the plants might not absorb it all. You end up with all these trace elements building up in your tank rather than getting absorbed, and that does go on to promote algae growth. So again, guys, always make sure your lighting is more than efficient before you go getting supplements or CO2, which is what we're going to talk about right now. Okay guys, so this is basically my CO2 setup for this aquarium, and I'll also quickly discuss the filtration system on it. So I'll go into this filtration system first. So on this aquarium I'm just running a little Aqua 1 canister filter, specifically the Aquarius 550. So I think it does about 500 litres an hour, I think it does off the top of my head. I think it's about 500 litres an hour. That's completely fine for this size aquarium. The beauty of a canister on a planted tank is one, maximum biological filtration, because canisters can hold a lot of bacteria because they have a lot of media in them. And two, and the main one, their flow rate. Canisters aren't the fastest flow rate for their size, which is good for plants. Plants don't like fast moving water, they don't like fast flow. If your plants are constantly flapping around in the flow, they're going to fall apart, the leaves are going to come off. So you want to have enough flow to keep the fish happy, but not too much that it's going to make your plants fall apart and not grow properly, basically. So canisters are great. Now for the CO2 system on this, I have just got my CO2 bottle. This is a 1 litre CO2 bottle, so not too massive, but it's more than enough for this tank. Connected to the CO2 bottle, I just have my regulator that just basically lets me know how much CO2 is in the bottle. And connected to the regulator I have a solenoid, which is this little black box here. That's basically the only mechanical feature on this whole thing. Connected to the solenoid is a bubble counter. So what all this does, you've got your gas bottle, right? Full of gas, full of CO2. Connected to that is your regulator. That just lets you know your bottle's full or empty, or how much is in there, basically. The solenoid is the mechanical device that you plug in. All this is, in a solenoid, is just a little valve that opens and closes. So when you plug it in and turn it on, it opens. You turn it off, it shuts. So it's letting CO2 pass through when it's open, when it's on. So you hook your CO2 up to a timer. I'll talk about the timer in a second and why you need that too. You have this little dial here which you can turn just to adjust the amount of CO2 going into your tank. So if I turn this, you'll see in the bubble counter, it's not really speeding up because I've actually just noticed I'm almost out of CO2. But generally when you turn that, these bubbles go faster. This is how you keep count of how much CO2 is going into your tank. Generally small tanks you want to run about 1 bubble per second, so you count as the bubbles go. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, basically like that. 1 bubble a second is more than enough for a small tank. If it's a bigger tank you can go 2 or 3. So the CO2 goes up through here, through the hose. Have a little one-way valve there just to stop backflow of water getting into this. And the hose goes along here into my reactor. So this is a Sarah reactor. You can just use a diffuser if you like, if you don't want to get too advanced. The only difference is you have this hose going up to your tank, and you have it connected to a diffuser which is in your tank, and that basically just produces all these little bubbles, all these little CO2 bubbles in your tank. You get about 70% absorption with a diffuser, but because some of those bubbles do go to the surface of the water and they just pop and disperse, so they're wasted. With a reactor, 100% absorption. CO2 is going into this. You'll notice the reactor is connected to the outlet of my canister. So the water is coming out of my canister, going into the reactor. You can't see because it's dark, but there's a little propeller in here that spins around as the water flows through it. And the CO2 is coming in right where the propeller is. So it gets churned up in the water. It gets churned up till it's 100% absorbed into the water. There's no more CO2 bubbles. It's all been absorbed. Water has to go all the way down the bottom, then up through a thin tube. It's in the middle of this cylinder. Back up here, back up and out into my tank. By the time water's going up and out, CO2 is fully absorbed into it. So you're not wasting any CO2. So that means I can basically run this tank on less CO2, less bubbles per second, than if I had a diffuser. And I could get better growth and better absorption even though I'm using less CO2. So I'd recommend one of these to anybody over a diffuser. I originally had a diffuser on my setup and it was great, it was fine, but I found this was much better, and you don't get micro bubbles. I mean, with a diffuser you do get micro bubbles going through your tank, or the CO2 bubbles, they're constantly flowing through your tank, and if you don't like the way that looks, one of these is a better option. So yes, that's basically that. And as I was saying before, with a timer on your CO2, you don't run CO2 all the time. You want to have it on a timer in sync with your lights. Because, as I was saying before, about how plants have to photosynthesize before they can absorb anything, and they only photosynthesize when the lights are on. So you run CO2 when the lights are on, and you have CO2 off when the lights are off. So you put them both on a timer together, is usually the way to go. Because if you were to turn your lights off, but still keep the CO2 going, your plants are going to stop photosynthesizing because there's no more light. But, CO2 is still going to be going into your tank. Plants aren't going to absorb it. So the CO2 is going to just keep building up and building up in your aquarium. And as we all know, carbon dioxide, it's basically going to suffocate you. So it works the same for fish. Carbon dioxide level gets too high in the tank, your fish suffocate and eventually die. Should this happen, and even if you may be running too many bubbles per second or something like that with your aquarium, even with the lights on, and you find your fish are all gasping at the surface for air, to fix this, all you have to do, there's a couple of things you can do to quickly reduce the CO2 level of your tank if that's happening to your fish. One of them is an air stone. Get an air pump with an air stone, put that in your aquarium, have it going as high as it goes, so maximum bubbles. When there's splashing on the water surface from all those bubbles breaking the surface tension of the water and popping, the CO2 disperses with them. That's one way to quickly reduce CO2 in your tank. Another way is to simply just do a water change. Just do a 50% water change. So those are the two things you can do if you do happen to overdo your tank with CO2. So other than that, plants do like very pristine water. So regular water changes are necessary if you want to have healthy plants. Because when you don't water change frequently enough, what happens is your nitrate and phosphate levels do build up in your tank. Nitrate can burn some plants and cause them to melt a bit, but the main one is algae. Nitrate and phosphate is like food for algae. It makes the algae just explode. So regular water changes keeps the algae down, and that's when you get nice clean plant leaves like these with minimal algae on them. Because if your plants get covered in algae, it kind of chokes the plant off as well as not looking very nice either. So yeah, regular water changes, your plants will be much happier. Also, tap water is high in nitrogen. Plants love nitrogen. Every time I do a water change, my plants purl like crazy. For those of you who don't know what purling is basically when plants release oxygen from the CO2 they've absorbed. You'll see all these little bubbles popping off the plants. You can't see it right now because this tank was literally just turned on. The lights just came on, so nothing has really started to purl yet. It's going to be another half an hour or so before that happens. But generally this tank has, all the plants are releasing all these little micro bubbles out of their leaves. That's an indication that things are going well. It means that my lights are good enough because they're pearling, meaning they're absorbing CO2, converting it into oxygen, and there's all this excess oxygen coming out of the leaves. So that means everything's running quite well. If you've got a good light and you've got a CO2 set up, but your plants don't pearl, something's wrong. They're not absorbing the CO2 if they're not pearling. So that is basically all the need to know basics about setting up and maintaining a planted aquarium. See you in the next vid, guys.